Every time things begin to flow, something blocks the way again. Just when conversations deepen, when understanding starts to bloom, when hope quietly rises in your chest, suddenly there is resistance. Silence, distance, confusion, and you find yourself asking the same painful question over and over: if this connection is from God, why is it so hard? That question doesn't come from weakness. It comes from sincerity. It comes from someone who senses that what they are experiencing is not random, not shallow, not merely emotional. You feel it in the still moments, when no one else is speaking into your life. There is something sacred here. Something meaningful. Something that feels bigger than timing, bigger than coincidence. And yet, the road keeps closing just as it seems to open. What if the difficulty is not a sign of denial, but of preparation? Most people assume that when God is involved, things should be smooth, easy, effortless. But scripture, history, and lived spiritual experience tell a very different story. The most God-ordained connections often face the most resistance, not because they are wrong, but because they are threatening to old patterns, old wounds, old identities, and even to spiritual forces that thrive on division and fear. The truth is this: God didn't cancel the road between you. He is clearing it, stone by stone. In the first place, He starts as not out there, but within you. There are invisible blockages that stop love from moving forward. They are not always obvious. In fact, the most powerful ones rarely are. They hide beneath logic, circumstances, and even spiritual language. Emotional blockages, spiritual blockages, circumstantial blockages, each one plays a role, and each one must be addressed, not rushed, not bypassed, but healed. Let's start with the emotional. Emotional blockages are often formed long before the connection ever appeared. They are built from disappointment, abandonment, betrayal, unmet expectations, and survival strategies you adopted when you had no other choice. You may have learned to be strong instead of vulnerable, independent instead of open, guarded instead of receptive. These traits once protected you, but now, they quietly restrict the flow of love. When God brings someone into your life who is meant to meet you at a deeper level, those old defenses begin to activate. Not because the connection is wrong, but because it is real. Real connection exposes what has been buried. It touches places you didn't even know were still tender. And when those places are touched, your system reacts, sometimes with fear, sometimes with withdrawal, sometimes with confusion. You might think the blockage is them, their behavior, their timing, their inconsistency, but God often uses another person as a mirror, revealing what still needs healing inside you. Not to shame you, but to free you. Then there are spiritual blockages. Spiritual blockages don't always look dramatic. They don't always feel dark. Often, they show up as inner resistance, spiritual exhaustion, or a sense of being stuck, despite prayer. These blockages can come from false beliefs about God, love, or yourself. Beliefs like, love must be earned. I'm too broken to be chosen. If it's meant to be, I shouldn't have to struggle. Or even, God only blesses others, not me. When these beliefs live quietly in your spirit, they interfere with alignment. You may pray for unity, but subconsciously expect separation. You may ask God for clarity, but fear what clarity will demand of you. And so the connection stalls, not because God is withholding, but because He is gently dismantling beliefs that would sabotage what He is building. There is also the spiritual reality of opposition. Anything God unites in the spirit will be challenged, not always through obvious conflict, but through delay, distraction, misunderstanding, and fatigue. The enemy doesn't need to destroy the connection, only to exhaust you into giving up. To make you question your discernment. To convince you that difficulty equals disapproval. But difficulty is not always rejection. Sometimes, it is refinement. Then come the circumstantial blockages, the ones that seem the most convincing. Distance, timing, other responsibilities, obligations, life pressure. These feel tangible, logical, undeniable. And yes, circumstances matter. God works through them, not around them. But circumstances are rarely the root. They are often the surface expression of deeper processes unfolding underneath. God uses circumstances to slow you down when your soul needs catching up. He allows pauses so identity can be strengthened. He permits delays so emotional maturity can develop. Because a connection that reaches you before you are ready will eventually break under the weight of unmet growth. Here is the part that shifts everything. God is not asking you to force the road open. He is asking you to let Him clear it. Stone by stone means patience. It means surrender. It means allowing God to remove what you've grown used to carrying. Pride, fear, control, old narratives, self-blame, idealization, even the need for certainty. And often, the most important stone he removes is the belief that love must arrive without resistance to be real. Some of the strongest unions in Scripture were preceded by long seasons of separation, testing, and inner transformation. Not because God was undecided, but because the people involved were still becoming who they needed to be. You are not being punished. You are being prepared, and preparation feels uncomfortable because it requires honesty. With God, with yourself, with what you truly want, and what you're afraid to lose. As God works within you, something subtle begins to change. Your anxiety lessens, your need to control the outcome weakens. Your trust deepens, not in the connection alone, but in God's character. You stop chasing signs and start developing discernment. You stop asking, will this work? And start asking, who am I becoming? That is when the road truly begins to clear. Not because circumstances suddenly align overnight, but because you do. And when alignment happens within, the external begins to respond. Conversations shift, resistance softens, timing opens, or clarity comes, and God redirects you without confusion or heartbreak. Either way, peace replaces torment. And peace is always the signature of God's work. If this connection is from God, it will not be destroyed by honest delay. It will not be undone by healing. It will not be threatened by growth. What is truly divine does not require your anxiety to survive. So instead of asking, why is this so hard? Consider a different question. What is God forming in me through this? Because the road is not closed. It is under construction, and the one clearing it is far more committed to the destination than you are. What he unites in the Spirit, no blockage can ultimately stop, once its purpose has been fulfilled. And this is where many people misunderstand the silence. Silence does not always mean absence. Sometimes it is evidence of work happening underground. Roots do not grow in sunlight. Foundations are not laid in open air. And God often chooses the quiet seasons to do the deepest construction, because noise would only interfere with what must be carefully aligned. When the connection feels paused, when progress seems undone, when yesterday's closeness turns into today's distance, it's natural to feel discouraged. You may replay conversations in your mind. You may wonder what you did wrong, what you failed to say, or what you should have done differently. But the pause is rarely about punishment. It is about protection. God protects what is fragile while it is forming. There are moments when moving forward too quickly would cause more damage than waiting. Love that arrives before emotional readiness becomes pressure. Unity that forms before identity stabilizes turns into dependency. And clarity that comes before healing can feel like rejection instead of direction. So God slows the pace, not to frustrate you, but to preserve what could otherwise collapse under its own weight. What feels like blockage is often containment. Another layer of this process is detachment. Not detachment from love, but from outcomes. God often removes the illusion that you are responsible for making the connection work. Because as long as you believe it depends entirely on your effort, fear will dominate your decisions. You will overthink, overgive, overinterpret, and in doing so, you unknowingly interfere with the natural unfolding of what God is orchestrating. When God begins clearing the road within you, he loosens your grip. You start to realize that forcing alignment only creates resistance. That chasing clarity creates confusion. That trying to control timing erodes trust. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, you begin to rest. Not because you stopped caring, but because you started trusting. This inner shift is critical. Because love that is guided by God does not survive through tension. It flows through surrender. There is also the matter of identity refinement. Before God allows a connection to move forward freely, he often ensures that both individuals are no longer seeking completion through each other. Love is meant to be shared, not used as a remedy for emptiness. If either heart is still trying to be saved by the other, imbalance forms. And imbalance eventually becomes burden. So God removes illusions. He allows moments where the connection does not soothe you, where it does not reassure you, where it does not define you. So you are forced to ask yourself difficult but necessary questions. Who am I without this? Would I still trust God if this never progressed? Is my peace anchored in His presence, or in potential outcomes? These questions are uncomfortable, but they are liberating. Because once your identity is no longer tied to the connection is free to become what it was always meant to be, something chosen, not clung to. As this internal work continues, you may notice a strange paradox. Even though nothing seems resolved externally, your inner world becomes calmer. The urgency fades. The emotional spikes level out. You stop checking signs obsessively. You stop interpreting every delay as doom. And that is not detachment from love, that is maturity within love. Maturity is quiet confidence in God's governance. Another truth that often goes unspoken is this: sometimes the blockage exists because God is working on the other person as well. And you are not meant to see that work. If you did, you might interfere, judge, or grow impatient. So God keeps it hidden. Just as He is addressing your wounds, He may be confronting their fears. Just as He is teaching you surrender, He may be teaching them courage. Just as He is grounding you in truth, He may be dismantling false narratives they have lived under for years. Growth does not happen at the same speed for everyone. And love that is orchestrated by God must account for two journeys, not one. This is why comparison is dangerous. Looking at other people's timelines will only distort your discernment. God custom builds processes based on history, temperament, trauma, calling, and capacity. What took someone else a month may take you a year, not because you are slower, but because your foundation is meant to carry something heavier. And heavier callings require stronger structures. At some point in this process, you may feel tempted to walk away, not out of peace, but out of exhaustion. That is when discernment becomes essential. There is a difference between being released and being worn down. One brings clarity and relief. The other brings numbness and regret. God does not lead through depletion. If walking away feels like self-protection rather than obedience, pause. Not everything that drains you is meant to be abandoned. Sometimes it is meant to be restructured. The enemy often pushes you to make permanent decisions in temporary fatigue. This is why God restores you before He resolves the situation. He strengthens your inner life so that you are no longer reactive. So that you are no longer driven by fear of loss. So that whatever the outcome, you remain whole. And here is something crucial. Healing within you does not guarantee a specific outcome, but it guarantees peace with whatever outcome comes. That is freedom. When God clears the road, He does not always promise the destination you imagined. But He always promises alignment with what is best for your soul. Sometimes the clearing results in reunion. Sometimes it results in redirection. But never confusion. If God is removing blockages, it will not leave you emotionally chaotic in the end. It will not keep you in endless limbo. It will not require you to abandon your dignity. What He builds honors truth, timing, and wholeness. So if you are still in the middle, still waiting, still trusting, still uncertain, understand this: the middle is not failure. It is formation, and formation is sacred. You are not behind. You are not forgotten. You are not being teased by hope. You are being shaped by wisdom that sees beyond the moment. Every stone God removes now prevents collapse later. Let Him work. Let Him clear. Let Him teach you how to love without fear, trust without control, and wait without losing yourself. Because when the road finally opens, whether toward the connection you've been praying for or towards something even greater, you will walk it as someone whole, not someone desperate. And that is how God protects love. There is a moment, quiet, almost imperceptible, when you realize you are no longer fighting the process. You may still desire resolution. You may still care deeply. But the inner struggle softens. The tightness in your chest loosens. You stop bracing yourself for disappointment. And without consciously deciding to, you begin to trust the unfolding more than your own interpretations of it. That moment is evidence of alignment. Because when God begins clearing the road from within, He does not rush you into answers. He settles you into truth. And truth does not scream. It stabilizes. One of the greatest transformations that happens during this season is the restoration of discernment. At first, emotions dominate everything. Every interaction feels loaded. Every pause feels personal. Every delay feels like a verdict. But as inner healing progresses, you begin to sense the difference between intuition and anxiety, between divine prompting and emotional projection. You stop mistaking intensity for confirmation. God is not found in emotional extremes. He is found in steady conviction. And conviction does not fluctuate based on someone's availability or responsiveness. It remains calm, even when circumstances are unclear. This is why God allows the connection to feel uncertain for a time, because certainty that is built on emotion alone will collapse. But certainty that is built on inner clarity will endure pressure. As the road clears, you may also notice something surprising. The connection no longer consumes your thoughts the way it once did. Not because it has lost significance, but because it has found its proper place. Obsession fades when alignment arrives. Not interest is not the same as detachment, it is balance. You begin to live again. You invest in your own growth. You rediscover joy that is not dependent on another person's choices. You reconnect with God in a way that is not transactional. Prayer becomes less about outcomes and more about intimacy. And that shift changes everything. Because God does not reward desperation. He responds to surrender. Another subtle blockage God dismantles is the fear of loss. Fear of loss drives control. Control suffocates love, and love that cannot breathe will never flourish. So God teaches you, sometimes painfully, that you can survive disappointment. That your heart is resilient. That even if things do not unfold the way you hope, you will not be destroyed. This lesson is not cruel. It is empowering. Once fear of loss is removed, you stop negotiating your worth. You stop accepting ambiguity that dishonors you. You stop shrinking to maintain connection. And ironically, that is often when respect and clarity increase, because healthy love responds to wholeness, not self-abandonment. God never asks you to lose yourself to receive what is meant for you. If something requires you to betray your values, silence your needs, or constantly doubt your worth, it is not aligned, no matter how strong the emotions feel. Alignment brings peace with yourself, not internal conflict. As the internal clearing continues, God also corrects expectations. Not expectations of love, but expectations of timing, form, and process. Many people unconsciously expect God to work on their schedule, through familiar patterns, in ways that feel comfortable. But God is not limited by your preferences. He is committed to your transformation. And transformation often requires disruption. He may disrupt how you relate, how you communicate, how you attach, how you define success in love. These disruptions feel like setbacks until you realize they are upgrades. Old versions of you could not sustain what God is preparing you for. So He builds a new capacity. This capacity allows you to hold love without fear, to wait without resentment, to desire without desperation, to trust without needing constant reassurance. And when that capacity is formed, the road ahead becomes usable, not because it is perfect, but because you are equipped. There is also a divine timing element that must be honored. God sees intersections you cannot see. He understands consequences you have not considered. He knows what must happen before two paths can safely converge. And He is never late. Delays often protect you from premature unions that would have fractured under future pressure. God waits until both hearts can withstand not just the joy of connection, but the responsibility of it. Because love is not only about affection. It is about stewardship. Stewardship of another person's heart requires maturity, humility, patience, and self-awareness. Without these, even sincere love can cause harm. God does not release what He has not prepared you to protect. If you find yourself questioning whether God has forgotten you, return to this truth: He does not forget what He has ordained. But He also does not rush what He is refining. In the waiting, you are learning how to listen without anxiety, how to respond without reactivity, how to trust without seeing. These are not small lessons. They are foundational, and foundations take time. There may come a day when the blockage lifts suddenly. Communication flows, circumstances align, resistance dissolves, and it will feel almost anticlimactic, not because it lacks meaning, but because you are no longer desperate for it. You receive it with gratitude instead of relief, with peace instead of urgency. Or there may come a day when God gently closes the door, not with pain, but with clarity. And you will realize that what you thought was loss is actually release. That what you feared was ending is actually protection. And that the love you were seeking is still ahead, not behind. Both outcomes are evidence of God's faithfulness. Because His goal was never to confuse you. His goal was to free you. Free you from attachment to outcomes. Free you from fear-driven love. Free you from believing that difficulty means disapproval. Free you to trust His voice over your emotions. If you are still in the season where the road feels blocked, take heart. God does not waste resistance. He uses it to reveal, refine, and restore. Every delay carries intention. Every pause carries purpose. Every stone removed prevents future collapse. You are not being tested to see if you are worthy. You are being trained to be ready. And readiness is not about perfection. It is about alignment. Alignment with truth. Alignment with peace. Alignment with the kind of love that does not demand your anxiety as proof of devotion. So remain open, but grounded. Hopeful, but surrendered. Expectant, but whole. Because when God finishes clearing the road, you will not walk it as someone begging for connection, but as someone capable of sustaining it. And that is the miracle you don't see at first, but will one day thank him for.